I don't know who can afford to bathe in bottled water, but that's the kind of future we're looking at with natural gas drilling. This is the biggest environmental threat facing New Yorkers. This is our water we're talking about. And if you're going to stand up and fight, if you're looking for an issue, this is the thing to fight for. We need numbers. We need people to stand up for the quality of our water. We need people to tell our legislators that we will not allow gas drilling in New York State. Everyone anywhere should be able to turn on their tap and have access to clean, safe drinking water. I live in Brooklyn, and I first got involved with this issue through some different colleagues I was working on climate issues with. We were working to fight coal, carbon capture plants, and just on different climate issues. They introduced me to what was happening with gas drilling. I became really interested and frightened. I'm a founding member of the Safe Water Movement, also known as SWIM, which is an organization that we put together, myself with a few other environmentalists. We've been actively working to oppose gas drilling. We founded this organization as a way for people to come together from both upstate and downstate in New York City and join forces to educate about gas drilling to the public, to oppose it on legislative level, and to really just be inclusive to anyone that wants to work on this issue across other groups that are already working on it. The groups that I'm working with are citizen groups, people groups, local groups that aren't receiving any kind of public or really very much private funding. We're just trying to fight to protect our water. We need to be working with other bigger groups, but we also need to beware because some of the big environmental NGOs are greenwashing us into thinking that natural gas is an appropriate transitional fuel, that it's much cleaner than coal. You may be receiving emails in your inbox from big NGOs that are asking you to take action to move us towards a clean energy future, to support our American Clean Energy Security Act, and to do all of these other actions which are really relying on natural gas being a major source of our energy future. And this is entirely inappropriate, and we need to beware of this kind of greenwashing. But we also need to be able to work together, and we need to be able to work together no matter where we're living. Everywhere is a watershed. We're all sharing the same water on this planet, and we need to stand together in solidarity to fight for the cleanliness of it, to fight for our rights, to have clean water, to be healthy, and to take care of our environments, and to live more sustainably. There are a number of different groups working across New York State, upstate New York, and in New York City that are all opposing gas drilling, doing massive outreach efforts, education. Of course, in different regions, the needs are very different. Some of the groups are Shale Shock, which is working around the Ithaca area, Shenango, Delaware, Otsego Gas Drilling Opposition Group, also known as CDOG, which is working in Shenango, Delaware, Otsego counties, Catskill Mountain Keeper, Shenango Greens. There's some groups in Otsego. There are a bunch of different groups that are working across the board. New York H2O is an organization that was founded with the intent to prevent gas drilling. And it's another nonprofit that has been working really hard to educate people and working with lawyers and different professionals to try to prevent gas drilling from affecting our water supplies. So there is a vast network of people across New York State that are all working on this issue from different angles. The reason why gas drilling right now is so controversial is because of the new methods of gas drilling being used, which aren't so new, but they're called unconventional methods of gas drilling, also known as hydraulic fracturing or hydrofracking or fracking. This method of drilling actually is different from the older methods of drilling, which are called vertical drilling. Vertical drilling was just drilling a well into the ground at a certain depth, blasting water into it and extracting the gas. Horizontal drilling is similar, but engages this new technique which actually blasts the rock horizontally, creating fissures across the whole rock, and uses much more water and also requires the use of certain lubricant chemicals, as they call them, some of which are very toxic. And that helps the water guide through the rock and releases the gas throughout the rock. So the rock actually gets split, and some of the water and the chemicals can find their way through fissures up the rock and can spread for great distances. The reason why they're using this kind of drilling now is because it's useful for this certain rock formation, which is very tightly bound shale rock. Some other rock formations are also used in New York State. We're talking about drilling in shale. And the gas in the shale is trapped in a way that's different from the gas that was trapped in other rock formations. It's more difficult to get at. Halliburton patented this technology to drill horizontally through the rock, and it's been all the rage among gas drilling companies because they can extract much more gas that way, and it has caused them to make wild estimates about how much energy is trapped in the shale that lies under the Northeast and also in other areas in Texas and Wyoming and various areas throughout the country. Fracking fluid is a combination of different chemicals that are used to lubricate the water and sand mixture that goes into the drill, that goes into the rock. There are over 250 chemicals that are used in any frack job. The fluids themselves are proprietary secrets by gas drilling companies. Essentially, this is poisoned water. What happens is they take 2 to 9 million gallons of water per well, per frack episode, and a well can be fracked up to maybe 10 times in its lifetime. So these are astronomical amounts of water. Say 2 to 9 million gallons of water per well, and we don't know, maybe 30 to 70% of that water, from some estimates, is staying in the ground, and that much water can be contaminated, can be poisoned, and can leak into groundwater supplies, can travel, can find its way to our taps. The Endocrine Disruption Exchange, a research organization in Colorado, tested 54 different fracking fluids and found that 30% of those chemicals are carcinogenic, 74% can cause respiratory illnesses or damage, and 54% can pose a danger to the blood system and cardiovascular systems. And that's just of the tested chemicals from that one study. Fracking fluids can be very hazardous and have been known to kill wildlife, to contaminate people's water supplies. Their well water has made them sick. And this is just from a very small percentage of the inputs to the drill bore. Another big question is, where is all of this water going to come from? There are a few regulatory agencies that manage water withdrawals in the region, including the Susquehanna River Basin Commission and the Delaware River Basin Commission. That's in our region, but there are other river basin commissions and other agencies that are supposed to regulate how much water is being withdrawn and used in different kind of operations, but they've never seen something on this scale. So 2 to 9 million gallons for one well is outrageous. And these commissions don't necessarily know what to do because they may feel strapped between wanting to not halt gas drilling, but at the same time being concerned about where is all this water going to come from. This water, which is a public resource, is being taken away from us, is being contaminated, is being put back into the ground, put back into our taps, put back into our water systems with no filtration because we don't have the technologies to properly filter it. And this is what's happening in Pennsylvania right now. This is what could be happening in New York State. People who live off the water in their land, which is everyone, but we don't notice it as much in New York City. But people who are drawing from their own private wells are the ones that are going to be directly affected by contaminated, poisoned water that's coming up. Indigenous nations that live across New York State, which have rights to their land, their rights are being taken away from them because their water is being taken away from them, and there's a large coalition of indigenous nations that are fighting against this as well, and that's another important group of people that really are being affected really negatively by this process. There are a number of different agencies on the local, state, and federal levels that regulate water, clean air, pollution, all different things that gas drilling connects with. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, is the federal authority on contamination of water, of air, and there are certain laws that are in place for various industries, but not for the oil and gas industry. And these are federal laws passed by the Environmental Protection Agency. So a really important thing would be to repeal the exemptions that the gas and oil industry has. Among other things, the 2005 Energy Bill, on the one hand, lavishes corporate gas and oil industries with tremendous subsidies. On the other hand, also grants them exemptions from a number of environmental protection laws that other industries have to abide by. These include the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, Resource Liability Acts, a number of other acts that really allow gas companies to do what they need to do. In 2005, our vice president was Dick Cheney, who was the former chairman of Halliburton. Halliburton is the industry leader in hydraulic fracturing technologies. Dick Cheney was the vice president and also the lobbyist for a number of congresspeople to pass these exemptions so that his company Halliburton would be able to enjoy the exemptions and continue drilling throughout the country. It's really pretty absurd. Beyond absurd, the Oil and Gas Accountability Project even states that this lack of regulatory oversight has led to illnesses and even deaths for many people and wildlife across the country. And the question is, if their process is so safe and isn't hazardous, why do they need these exemptions? This is a clear example of government being in bed with industry. Government needs to be accountable to the public, to the people who elected them. And we need to take back the tap. We need to take back the notion of democracy and demand from our legislators, demand from our government that they respond to us, not to industry. Governor Patterson of New York State should not be following Dick Cheney of Halliburton's example in terms of what we're doing for our energy needs in New York State. New York State has the opportunity to be a leader in truly clean energy and avoid this toxic, terrible process that irreversibly contaminates our water. On the local level in the city, New York City, the Department of Environmental Protection regulates the surface waters that flow to the city and has control over some of the reservoir systems and over our local water supplies. So the DEP has not until very recently exercised much authority or said much about gas drilling, but now are starting to talk about the threat that it could pose to our water system. So they could be a great ally in protecting New York City's water supply and hopefully the rest of the state's water supply by virtue of that protection. If the New York City water supply, for example, were contaminated by the fracking fluids used in natural gas drilling in the watershed area, which is in the Catskill-Delaware region, then 15 million people who rely on that watershed could potentially be contaminated. They could be drinking contaminated water. Of these 15 million people, many of them probably don't have the money to buy bottled water for every water need they have for bathing, for drinking, for washing their dishes. These contaminants can get into your body through a number of different avenues. And this is a real environmental justice issue. If people don't have access to the clean water that they need, globally, over 1.1 billion people don't have access to clean water. We don't think that kind of thing will happen in New York City. That's just in New York City. The rest of the state, the rest of the region would also be affected by this and has been affected by this. Recently, the Monongahela River, which runs through Pittsburgh, was so contaminated by suspected fluids from gas drilling operations that residents of Pittsburgh were told to drink bottled water. And then the contamination kind of went down and people started drinking the water again, but it's unclear if that's going to happen again, whether the water is really safe. These are the kind of things that are already happening in our region, which we really need to avoid. Water scarcity now is already a bigger threat than the financial crisis, and asking people to rely on corporate water companies and industries to give them the water that is also being deprived by these same industry mechanisms is completely unjust. The Department of Environmental Conservation on the state level is the agency that's tasked with regulating gas drilling and making sure that it's safe, that water is not contaminated, that certain regulations are met. The DEC is very understaffed in this regard. There are a number of reasons why we believe that the DEC is not prepared to deal with the rush of gas drilling. And the DEC recently released their environmental impact statement, which is called the Draft Supplemental Generic Environmental Impact Statement, or DSGEIS. And this is the most updated impact statement that reviews new horizontal methods of gas drilling in New York State. The impact statement is about 800 pages long. It's difficult to get through, but there are a number of different summaries. It's really important to issue comments on this impact statement. We have the opportunity to do that now.
Take action before it is too late. To learn more about banning the poisonous fracking gas extraction process throughout New York State and to sign the petition, go to un-naturalgas.org. To send comments to Governor Patterson and to the Department of Environmental Conservation about fracking and the danger to New York State's water, go to shaleshock.org. To learn more about the dangers of hydrofracking and to watch video of people's tap water exploding, go to waterunderattack.com.
Recently, I went to an environmental summit on environmental justice, air quality, and climate change at the EPA's New York City office, hosted by the Department of Environmental Conservation, with representatives from the EPA, the DEC, and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, NYSERDA, and a few other organizations and groups, and it was fairly well attended. There was a lot of conversation about environmental justice issues, about New York City's and New York State's response to climate change. The mayor's office was also represented in talking about Plan NYC, which is New York City's response to the threats of climate change and onslaught of sea level rise and various other things. And the state's energy plan was discussed, and there are some great plans that the state is coming up with to mitigate effects of climate change. Thinking that gas drilling is really pretty well connected to these issues of air pollution, environmental justice, and climate change, I raised a question about how we can have this conversation and not be talking about gas drilling, and how can we be reaching our targets and yet still be exploring gas drilling, and how can we be trying to protect our water and our air and communities that are marginalized and still be talking about gas drilling. And my question was really not that well received. I was basically told that I should bring my thoughts to the hearing that will be held in New York City, and I should be submitting my comments to the energy plan and to the environmental impact statement, but that was not the forum to be talking about gas drilling, which I found to be a little bit ironic given the title of the summit. Some people there did appreciate my comments and told me themselves that they were also working on this issue. So I think that we're all out there, but there still is a level of secrecy and denial about this, which really needs to be unveiled. The bargain of trading natural gas for fresh water is completely unacceptable. Water, though, is the third largest global industry behind electricity and oil. It's a $400 billion industry. As the 20th century was the century of oil, the 21st will be the century of water. Water wars have and are sprouting up all over the world, where people are being denied access to fresh water for something like natural gas or Coca-Cola or company profits. And we really cannot allow this to happen in New York State, here in the US, in the world. We're really being taken advantage of. This is really an unsustainable model, because the trade-off is our clean water forever for a limited supply of so-called natural gas for a limited time for a lot of money. And this is completely unacceptable. The water, the solids and different chemicals in the water can probably never be filtered out. We don't have the technology to filter out these kind of chemicals now, and it would be extremely expensive to try to build this technology anytime in the near future. The Earth has a nice way of eventually cleansing itself, but eventually is on a timescale that we're completely unfamiliar with. And the gas, while certain experts say that this gas could supply our nation's energy needs for 2 decades, or there's tons of different estimates, that's still 2 decades versus an infinite amount of time with not having clean water. Given the records of gas spills, of leakages, of water contamination traveling in plumes through the rock and underground supplies, it's not a question of if the water supply will be contaminated in New York City, if water supplies will be contaminated in New York State. It's a question of when and how severely. And it's completely environmentally irresponsible to allow any kind of gas drilling, because even the gas drilling, however regulated it is, there can be leaks. There can be leaks in the drills themselves. There are gaps between the bores. Sometimes they're not sealed properly because it's expensive to seal the bore with concrete all the way down into the rock. So there have been leaks and cracks there, and that's been documented. There have been spills, the wastewater, which may be lying in an open pit with some heavy-duty plastic underneath it to protect the water from entering the groundwater supply. These wastewater pits can evaporate and can also just get into the groundwater because there can be tears in the plastic. So through the wastewater, through the drilling itself, through spills, maybe from trucks that are trucking the wastewater away, or diesel fuel spills, which have all been documented. It's really a matter of when is this going to happen? What is New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation going to do to ameliorate the effects? And how are local governments and local communities going to be burdened with this kind of response? How are we going to be able to organize around it? So part of what we're doing right now is trying to prevent gas drilling from happening at all. And part of what we're doing is trying to come up with our own emergency response system so we can figure out how we're going to support each other, because we don't expect that the state's really going to do it. The people with the power here to make the decision of whether or not there's going to be gas drilling, the people who are paving the way for gas drilling, are Governor Patterson and the Department of Environmental Conservation. But the DEC is really functioning under Governor Patterson, even though it's an independent state agency. Patterson is the one that we need to go after, and he's the one that we need to be calling, petitioning, and storming his offices. What some people can do right now, on the one hand, is get together with plans to be heard independently in different groups, but also to be commenting on the DEC's DSGIS and to be commenting on the New York State Energy Plan, to send in these comments to these agencies directly and really express your concerns, the faults and failures of the impact statement, the gaps in the energy plan, how are we going to reconcile our energy plan with water contamination, and writing into Governor Patterson and really writing into your senators and representatives to tell them that this is not what we want for New York's energy future, it's not what we want for New York's environmental future. We can try to use our legislators to pressure some emergency legislation to ban gas drilling. We can try to issue a moratorium on gas drilling. We can try to ban gas drilling.
Take action before it is too late. To learn more about banning the poisonous fracking gas extraction process throughout New York State and to sign the petition, go to un-naturalgas.org. To send comments to Governor Patterson and to the Department of Environmental Conservation about fracking and the danger to New York State's water, go to shaleshock.org. To learn more about the dangers of hydrofracking and to watch video of people's tap water exploding, go to waterunderattack.com.
Whether you're upstate New York drinking out of your own private well or you're turning on your tap in Brooklyn like I am, we all have the right to be drinking clean water, and we all have the responsibility to be working together to ensure that that's what we're going to get, that we're going to keep our water clean, and that we're going to ensure the safety of our water for generations to come.
Bay State Atlantic Yards is a deal that is done. It's to be made of glass and steel, but it's really built from dung. It's a dung deal, D-U-N-G, it's a dung deal.
You got me on my knees, you're taking all my cheese. Nobody's got a job, genetic corn on the cob. The politicians protect industry, they don't do shit for you and me. Vietnam-style occupation, take it to the United Nations. What do they do? Nothing anymore. But tales of the new depression. Why must you hold us down?
Watch Monday night, 11:30 Brooklyn time, midnight Manhattan time, are always online.
What nation are we invading? Iraq? Iran? Iraq?
Our freedoms and our rights are slowly being eroded by executive orders and by signing statements.
Do you think the government should be able to just march in for a developer and kick you out? You should think that if it can happen here, it can happen to anyone, anywhere.
This devolution of the American press began in 1988, when Ronald Reagan abolished the Fairness Doctrine.
I don't understand why we can't have a little piece of history when everybody else has so much.
No more stolen, fraudulent elections.
This is Freddie's Brooklyn Roundhouse with Cynthia McKinney.
As my fellow Brooklynite, Allen Ginsberg said, the soul should never die ungodly in an armed madhouse.
Freddie's Brooklyn Roundhouse. Watch the show the corporate media doesn't want you to see. Tuesdays at 8 in Brooklyn, Thursdays at 8:30 in Manhattan, and online all the time at Freddy'sBrooklynRoundhouse.org and YouTube.com/Atlantic Yards.
Hello, I'm Reverend Billy from the Church of Life After Shopping. Like many New Yorkers and people around the world, I was dismayed by a above-the-fold front page article in this Saturday, October 10th. New York Times. The presentation of the possibility of driving natural gas from shale deposits in the hydro-fracking process was presented by these writers as if there was no controversy at all, as if people's tap water wasn't exploding, as if there aren't cancer epidemics, people losing their hair, people moving away from whole regions of our country with their children, just dropping everything and leaving as a result of the poisoning of the aquifers and the water supply that they use to live. It's remarkable that apparently the industry just gave them a press release and they wrote their article. We need to press here in New York City, from whatever leverage we have, for upstate and downstate. All New York State needs to be free of fracking. We have to be confident of our water supply for our families. We have to be confident for the people that live anywhere in New York. And let's not stop there. Some of the worst fracking is going on in neighboring Pennsylvania. We need to step forward and represent this emergency with everything we've got. I hope you join me in raising our voices to save our water. Amen.